when people, the commoner, for example, don't have a case that they think should be prosecuted, they think, well, look, they're picking on us. Well, no, this happens all the time, even within the justice system overall. So it's not just the commoner experiencing this. Police officers want to charge somebody, and yet no prosecutor wants to charge them. Not Hello, it's November 2024, and this video is inspired by something I read a little while back, and it has to do with law and legal cases. Now, I'm just going to pause here for a moment before I get into this discussion. I've noticed, even since the events that began in 2020, people talking about legal matters and so forth in various different groups, primarily with the people who, as a descriptive, did not comply. And even the years prior, I've seen people with different cases and so forth come out and online trying to share their story. And there seems to be a real theme here, and it all ties in with the common person. And, for example, lacking critical thinking skills, an extensive knowledge base, and not being able to separate emotions when making conclusions. And that's a real big theme with the commoner, because they think completely different than, for example, law or elite types and so forth. Now, what really got my attention with this case that I read a letter. The letter was addressed to police, and this took place in Alberta. Now, I believe it may still be ongoing. I'm not sure, but whatever. And apparently it began back in 2015, if I'm not mistaken. It's really hard to get a pulse of really what's going on just based on this letter that I read. And I'm assuming that this letter that was given to the police was to be some sort of formal complaint. Now I'm going to pause here for a moment again. Now, this is not a dig against the author of the letter or any of the parties involved. I don't know any of these people. I don't even know the case. I'm only going by the letter. Now, this is a good way to try to explain something, because that letter should be a standalone letter, and giving it to anyone, like, for example, police or another lawyer or whomever, it should be very clear, concise. This thing is far from it. You can tell whoever wrote it was very emotional. Now, I'm not going to be addressing, for example, how legalese and so forth and words in law have different meaning than for the commoner. This is not going to be really focusing on law itself, rather highlighting the commoner and their approach to everything. Now, right off the top, I'm just going off by memory here, the letter was not coherent in the sense, one, the timelines were kind of jumbled up and trying to figure out who's who and what actually took place. And the word fraudulent was used throughout the whole thing. Fraudulent this, fraudulent that. It appears that they lost some cases and had to pay costs, and they were saying it was fraudulent and theft and everything else. Asking for costs when you lose, for example, a lawsuit is common practice. And there's even ways to double that, the costs, but I'm not going to share that little secret. Very few people who practice law know about it. Anyway, I digress. And a lot of the things that I was filtering through and thinking, well, yeah, this is the judicial process going through. And simply because someone doesn't like the outcome doesn't mean it's fraudulent or anything else. Now, I really have to stress here, I'm not stating or implying that any cases ruled on in favor of or against this individual or any other individuals named was just, was right. I don't know. I can only go by on what was read. What's interesting is now this letter is being circulated through social media and people are, really behind it. And there's no evidence that was provided. There was reference to what the letter called exhibits, which a better term in this case would be attachments, and then the court would deem whatever, for example, if it went to court, as exhibits. But there was some references, allegations to that, but it almost seems like, for example, there was a ruling against whatever, this individual or whoever, and they were saying it was fraudulent. Well, it wasn't fraudulent, there was a ruling. Now, am I stating or implying that the judicial system, police, and everything else cannot be corrupted? Absolutely not. I've proven in my case, without a shadow of a doubt, beyond a reasonable doubt, that court cases are tampered with. Individuals are pressured and everything else. But I digress. But it's really interesting to see how people, the commoner, when they're dealing with legal matters and so forth, it's totally alien to them. They really can't grasp what's going on, especially when their emotions are involved. And people think, well, we'll just go to court, we'll go to court. They don't have an understanding why, for example, a prosecutor, crown prosecutor, would not prosecute something. I was going to share a real quick story just to put things into perspective. I remember one time being in the prosecutor's office. We were just sitting there going over, I think, the day's files or something, can't remember. But there was 2 or 3 officers that came in, and they really wanted to charge this one lady driver for whatever reason. We don't even know. And no prosecutor in the room wanted to take the case. And they walked out really upset. Now, why am I sharing that story? Well, when people, the commoner, for example, don't have a case that they think should be prosecuted, they think, well, they're picking on us. Well, no, this happens all the time, even within the justice system overall. So it's not just the commoner experiencing this. Police officers want to charge somebody, and yet no prosecutor wants to charge. And on the flip side, you have police wanting to, well, for example, it starts off with police falsely accusing someone, and then the prosecutor takes the case when they shouldn't have. That does happen as well. I'm just trying to really put things into perspective, as well as highlight how the common person has no understanding of how the legal process works. Writing letters that are incoherent doesn't help the cause. And I don't know what more I can say to that. And I've seen this over many years. People even coming to me online saying, hey, check this out. Everyone's behind them, because the commoner can relate to the emotional content of, for example, these types of letters, because it's in their language. It's in their realm of understanding. But it doesn't mean anything. And perhaps that's why a lot of people have a hard time, the commoner, grasping, for example, my story that happened in Alberta, because it's very thorough, supported with a plethora of independent evidence. There's no emotional content involved, etc. And the commoner can't wrap their head around it. It's hard for them to understand. Anyway, just wanted to give you some things to think about. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Check this out. Everyone's behind them because the commoner can relate to the emotional content of, for example, these types of letters, because it's in their language. It's in their realm of understanding. But it doesn't mean anything. And perhaps that's why a lot of people have a hard time, the commoner, grasping, for example, my story that happened in Alberta.
Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people saying to me, oh, when is it going to get easier? When you die.